The goal of this video is to cover the first assignment, going into one of the models in a little bit more detail to talk a little bit about what I'm looking for and why this assignment in particular met many of those objectives. So this is actually from a student that I had last summer, and he gave me permission to use it, so it has his name on it. I did, of course, change some of his other contact information, but he was interested in applying to Google, and he took a lot of steps to make sure that his packet looked really professional, and he actually ended up using this to apply to an internship with Google. So, in terms of his resume, if you look at it, it's pretty simple, straightforward, but it does a lot of things very effectively. And so, if you look first, his name is clearly stated, there's his address, and then you see clear section headers. So, education, programming languages, relevant experience. Right off the bat, he's setting up the resume in order to highlight the information that the reader would find most beneficial. And so, he begins with his education because they're usually looking for somebody who's pursuing a specific degree, and so he states his degree first, not his institution, and he also highlights his cybersecurity emphasis, and he indents it to make it stand out a little bit more. Here you also see that he's using the full width of the page, and so there's a lot of good formatting that he's doing here. Again, it's not super fancy, there's no bells and whistles, but at the same time, he's paying attention to what's effective and what can clearly communicate that information. The second thing he ends up highlighting is here is those programming languages. In a computer science setting, it would make sense to highlight programming languages. If you're in a different setting, there might be something here that's attached to education or should go early in the resume because it's really important to highlight. So this could be certifications, other kinds of relevant education or certificates or any other kinds of information that you want to place fairly high in the resume because it's important, and you also want to make sure to highlight. He also has relevant experience with his courses because the internship application specifically stated something about having taken certain classes, so he wanted to make sure that those were highlighted. In addition to the fact that he maintained a database, that was probably something that they were also looking for. So the goal here is that he recognizes that some of his work experience perhaps is not as relevant to the internship as his education and that relevant experience. So he uses this really quick section, relevant experience, to highlight the things that they're looking for. But then he also gives work experience because he recognizes that he can demonstrate some other skills and qualities that those earlier sections may not actually highlight. So one of the things I want to call your attention to in his work experience is that he's able to point out the ways that in his most current job, he troubleshoots, he maintains draft systems, he trains new employees, so he's working with people. So he's highlighting some of those interpersonal skills that perhaps the job application was looking for. In addition to just being able to highlight some of those skills and qualities that people often stick in that qualifications or skills section that are detached from any context. So here he's placing those within a context. Again, with the formatting, work experience, you see a clear hierarchy of information, the overall header of work experience, and then two main subheaders. And it also shows his progression through the company and holding different positions. And that sends a really nice message too, that he's worked at places for long term, he's committed, and he's advanced, and he's doing what he needs to do to advance. Here on this line, you can see the place that he worked, and it's bolded, but then he puts the place where it's located, and then the date over here. Again, making full use of the width of the page so that it breaks up some of the visuals. So there's some clear choices there, and he's crammed quite a bit of information onto one page, but it's easily skimmable. So these are all just good things to keep in mind. We'll go over this when we talk about document design and writing these, but I wanted to point out the ways that this one in particular, in a very simple, clean format with no super big bells and whistles, is able to accomplish those purposes. Now, on that note, there are different ways that he could have chosen to show his information, and I'll show you one in class where the student opted for a more visually appealing graphic resume because she thought that it would be beneficial in order to show off her design skills. And that might be something that you think about as well, as ways to incorporate color or images or visuals into your own resume, which is possible to do. In his cover letter, he notes in the first paragraph, he follows the template that I will provide you, but he notes in the first paragraph like who he heard, what he's applying for. I heard about Google's summer intern summer engineering practicum internship from software engineer Christina Wilmot, who's his sister, but is also someone who works in the company. So here he's taking the opportunity to name drop two different people, Christina Wilmot and Charles Burnell. And in those two people, he's essentially showing that he's done background research on the company and that he's tapped into two people who have worked for Google and might be familiar to the person he's applying to. Then he also has a statement where he essentially highlights why he would be a good fit. It would be a great opportunity for me to bring my unique perspective to the company while building practical skills in the field of computer science. Well, this paragraph or this sentence could be a little bit sharper. At the same time, he's setting up what he's going to be talking about in the other two paragraphs. So one of the strengths of his cover letter is that he gives very specific details. So his first topic sentence is, my academic career has given me a solid foundation in the basics of computer science and the use of programming languages. And then he gives a specific example. And so a little bit later in this paragraph, one such project was to use Java to create a music player that included a full GUI and allowed a user to create and manage a playlist to listen to songs. So there's a specific instance of an application of a programming language. And that's going to be something that the reader is going to really be interested in. He goes into a little bit more detail about what that looked like and what he had to essentially program in order to make the thing work the way he wanted it to. And then he also goes into the fact that he kept tinkering with it after the class, which shows an interest in, as he states at the end, demonstrates his drive to improve and innovate, which aligns with Google's mission to make the world's data more accessible. So here he's really thinking very carefully about his audience, but he's also bringing in specific examples, concrete details in order to show why he would be a good fit for this position. So that's the kind of thing that you're going to want to think about for your own cover letters, are making an argument to the reader and perhaps connecting it in various ways with your sense of the audience's needs. And connecting it to Google's mission is a really savvy move on his part that shows that he's done the background research and he is interested and he has tailored this letter to what the company seems to be wanting. The last part is his memorandum. His memorandum was one of the strongest, partly because he was very conscious of his rhetorical moves and he was really good about articulating those. So there's two places I want to highlight, which are his audience analysis, and he talks a lot about Google's emphasis or mission. And then he also talks about his contact within the company, his sister, and how she helped him understand that better. Here, this audience analysis does a particularly good job of highlighting what it is that Google cares about. And he brings in the insider information, the strong company culture in what it means to be googly. Googliness is a nebulous term that describes people's passions to gain knowledge, create, innovate, and improve the world. I've kept this culture in mind while writing my cover letter. So this is one of those things that the audience analysis is intended to do, which is to give information that is informing the approach that you then take in the resume and the cover letter. So then if you look at the rhetorical analysis, you'll see that he does just that. So here's a statement. My sister says that the recruiters are interested in specific libraries and uses of programming languages listed, so I included some of the areas I focused on in my classes. So he's bouncing back and forth between his understanding of what they're looking for and then what he did to respond to that. Specific course names or languages, or you help them understand what experiences I have, things like that. So that's him explaining he included this thing and here's why he included it and why it's going to be effective. And so on. Same with the cover letter. And he talks again, I was fortunate to know a Google software engineer and current engineering intern, so I got direction on what recruiters look for in a candidate. And then he goes into some of the things they're looking for. One of the requirements is to answer several short essay questions and including specific use of my strongest programming language. So he took the time in the letter to answer that question, which is a specific use of a programming language. And so a class project, a specific concrete detail, they're going to want to know that information because it's not just enough to say, I know X. It's better to say, and here's how I've used that information and that knowledge to do something, because they're mostly interested not in what you know, but in how you can apply what you know in a practical way that will benefit the mission of the company. So keep all of that in mind as you're drafting your resume, cover letter, and then thinking about how to communicate that to me in your memo. Finally, in the conclusion, he talks a little bit about just concluding and thinking about why he would be a good fit for this position. And one of the things that I wanted him to add in was that he's thinking about how he can continue bolstering his professional experience in order to be successful. So that's it for the A1 model, and I just wanted to walk through it to give you a sense of the kinds of things that I found particularly useful and interesting in this particular response, but also keep in mind that you shouldn't use this as something that you have to follow exactly. This is just one response, and you have a lot of choices that you can make, and that's something I can provide guidance on, but this will give you the overall sense of what kinds of things I'll be looking for.